Welcome to Pedo Teeth Talk, brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, a show that delivers cutting-edge ideas for the professionals specializing in pediatric dentistry and promotes the highest standards of patient care with today's top experts in the field. Now here's your host, Dr. Joel Berg.
Thank you for tuning into Pedo Teeth Talk, where we bring you the contemporary issues important to you and your practice, brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. I'm your host, Joel Berg. And thank you to our Pedo Teeth Talk sponsor, Hugh Freedy, for helping us bring you great content. We couldn't do this without them. Visit them at www.hughfreedy.com. That's HU-FRIEDY.com. We're here today live at the annual session 2022 in San Diego, California, and I'm talking, fortunately, with Dr. Tim Wright. Dr. Wright received his DDS degree from West Virginia University and completed his pediatric dentistry training and Master of Science degree at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. He currently is the Bawden Distinguished Professor in the Division of Pediatric Dentistry and Public Health at the Adams School of Dentistry at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where he has also served as Pediatric Dentistry Department Chair and Department of Endodontics Interim Chair. He is a Diplomate of the American Board of Pediatric Dentistry, a Fellow in the American Academy for the Advancement of Science, and a past President of the American Association of Dental Research. He has chaired the Council of Scientific Affairs for the American Dental Association and also for the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. He has published over 200 peer-reviewed scientific manuscripts, edited 2 textbooks, and authored 24 text chapters. Dr. Wright is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the American Dental Association. So, Tim, it's so great to have you here. This is our first guest live here in San Diego. Thanks for being with us on Pedo Teeth Talk.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, and look forward to talking.
So, Tim, you and I chatted before about all the great things you've done, what you're doing now. And in our 20 or so minutes today, I wanted to talk to have you talk to our audience about a little bit about your career, and then we're going to end up talking about JADA, the Journal of the American Dental Association, because we pediatric dentists are really excited that you are the new editor, and we followed you and your science in the past, and now you have this opportunity to represent and advocate for the future. So first, tell me a little bit about your career leading up to before you became the editor of JADA. Just summarize some of the things I didn't say in my intro.
Well, it's been a fun career, I got to say that. And, pediatric dentist came to me through public health. When I graduated from dental school, I actually wanted to be a general dentist and hang out in the Southwest and ski. That was my ambition. But in public health for a couple of years, I found a real passion for pediatric dentistry, went on to specialize, and was fortunate to have a research-related program at the University of Alabama in Birmingham, and that led to things that I've done in genetics and research and the clinical care. So my passion has been education and patient care, and it's been a wonderful career to marry those two aspects of pediatric dentistry and the science and the educational components.
You're also known to a lot of us for your work in bringing genetics and its influence on oral manifestations of various syndromes, conditions. Maybe talk a little bit about how you got involved in that, and are you still involved in that work, publishing in that area?
Yeah. So when I was a resident at Birmingham, because I'd been in public health for a couple of years and I'd done lots of restorative dentistry, but I was being challenged with these fascinating genetic cases, epidermolysis bullosa, myelogenous imperfecta, and it was clear to me that there was very little known, and this was all pre-genetics time. They discovered DNA, but we couldn't sequence genes, not meaningfully at that time.
Right. So pre-DNA is when you started, yeah.
Yeah. It was prehistoric almost. But so I started working with the geneticists to evaluate these cases and understand what was it that was causing them, and then how could we translate that into better patient care. So, yeah, I've done a lot of gene chasing. I'm currently still involved with family groups with the Ectodermal Dysplasia Foundation, hypophosphatasia family groups, support groups, still treat lots of those kids that have these interesting manifestations of different genetic anomalies, and keeping up with some of the fascinating new therapeutics that are coming out with protein replacement, now with gene modification that's happening with CRISPR and gene therapy. So, yeah, still engaged in that quite a bit, and the science marches on so much. That's just, it's really fascinating.
So do you see now in the post-DNA and genetics era that we live in, everything is molecular genetics today. We don't even have discrete basic sciences anymore. There's no more this or anatomy might be different, but biochemistry and everything is kind of merged into molecular biology. Do you see an impact on clinical care based on discoveries and with oral diseases or syndromes? That the fact that we can characterize the genomic implications or what the cause at the gene level?
Absolutely. There are now therapeutics. I mean, there's a clinical trial right now to replace the protein for the X-linked hypohydrotic ED, and that's all come about because of the molecular biology. Our ability to interrogate the human microbiome is all related to molecular biology, molecular genetics, to be able to say, okay, not only what bugs are there, but what are they doing? What's their transcriptome and their metabolome now? So, yeah, it is changing. We're just on the very cusp of getting to know what we can do and then translate that into actual care. But it's happening, and it's going to happen in a big way over the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm really excited about this, and I want to follow the publications in JADA that are going to speak to this. We will now pause for a word from our sponsor.
Do you need additional CE hours but don't have time to travel to courses? Did you attend the annual session and want to listen to the audio recordings? Check out AAPD's Education Passport, an online learning center, where you can earn CE and listen to audio recordings from all of our continuing education courses and more. Visit educationpassport.aapd.org.
Let's get into JADA. So how did you become the editor of JADA? I mean, what was the process and what inspired you to want to do it? And then we'll talk about what it's like and what you're doing.
Okay. Well, it wasn't something that I had ever really thought about, being an editor for a journal. And so this was a COVID thing. So this was back in 2020, that summer, and we had just come out of being not quarantined, but sequestered, shut down. And my garden looked good, my yard looked good, and I thought, okay, what am I going to do? What else can I do? And I got a call from the search committee, and they said, would you be interested in this? Your name's popped up a few times. And I said, let me do some research on this. And so I talked to former editor Michael Glick, and I said, tell me a little bit about what this entails and what it's like and what you loved about it, what you didn't love about it. And I was an associate editor for the time for Archives of Oral Biology, so I had some concept of what was going on. But so I agreed to look at it and went through the process. So it was a recruitment process, and they interviewed me a few times, and they apparently decided I was a good fit for that.
Wow. So when did you start?
So I started January 1st of 2021, so I'm finishing up about almost a year and a half at this point.
So you're a little bit over a year and a half into it, and so what's been the one big discovery that you didn't realize before you accepted the job? Is there something you could share with us in that regard? Surprising? I think it's going to be a positive thing, most likely.
Well, yeah, so the amount of information that you can distribute, which was part of the reason I took the job in the first place, was it's a forum to provide and hopefully provide very good, useful information to the practicing clinicians and to the world at large, all healthcare providers that are out there. The sheer volume was, I had a concept of that, but until you get into it, you don't necessarily know how hard that fire hose is going to be throwing stuff at you. And the diversity of the information that's out there. Dentistry, JADA represents all dentistry. Right. So you get all the specialties, all the general dentistry, and then even peripherally related things, from the auxiliary groups and even other scientists who are not dentists. We encourage them to submit.
We're part of the body, so we bring the body into your journal. So
right. All the systemic health stuff, yeah. And there's a lot of good papers that get submitted that are related to oral and systemic health and the medical aspect. So, yeah, that's all been fun. And one of the goals of the journal is to elevate conversation around issues, access to care, diagnostics, whatever that may be. And I didn't realize how important a role that was and how you could facilitate those. And sometimes that can be contentious. People have very strong feelings about certain aspects of, whether access and who should be delivering health care and those kind of issues. But they're important to have those discussions, and that's a cool forum to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So who are the readers of the Journal of the American Dental Association? Obviously, ADA members. I mean, what kind of reach and what kind of information do you know about in terms of who the active readers are? Are they academics? Are private practitioners reading it?
Well, they claim that it's the most read dental journal that's out there, and I've
Yes.
got 170,000 ADA members or whatever that receive that every month.
That's
so
big, yes.
That's big. And a lot of members of specialty groups are also members of the ADA. And beyond that, you have all the electronic access, and so we track all of the hits and reads and downloads, and globally who's pulling that information. And so the United States is the biggest hit, but it's very much a global audience. In fact, there's one of them is translated. They compile every other issue into Portuguese in Portugal.
Really?
So yeah, there's a Portugal. Yeah, so. And they tried to do that in China, and it never really quite got off the ground. It's a little more difficult the translation, and trying to do that was more difficult. But so we do have, and we have international editors on the editorial board because it is such a broad audience that's out there. So it's global.
That's great. Now, you told me before that, one of the missions of the journal is to disseminate knowledge, obviously. But, a lot of the knowledge base in dentistry is sort of anecdotal. Most of the procedures, things that we've done that we're religious about doing, don't have a lot of evidence behind them. It's like, well, I've done it that way for 30 years and it works. And then something new comes along and we expect it to have a randomized controlled trial. So the thing we've been doing for 30 years didn't have a randomized controlled trial. So how do you kind of get perspective around that, in terms of the journal, for example?
Well, when I came in, one of the first things we did with the associate editors was define what our vision and mission were.
Yeah.
And part of that vision is that we provide evidence-based knowledge. And so we're very much committed to that. And when you look back to the question about downloads and access, the guidelines that are developed, like the sealant guideline that was joint between AAPD and the ADA, those are the biggest hits frequently that we get.
I see.
And they're evidence-based, and they're based on systematic reviews. And so we publish a lot of systematic reviews. A lot of those got done during COVID because people weren't doing the randomized controlled trials because everybody was shut down. But we take the evidence part of that so that it's not only useful information, but that it's valid information. And quality and fidelity of information, you get an awful lot of not very high fidelity, and it's all over the internet. You can put it out whatever you want. So we take that part very seriously, and that's part of the peer review process to make sure that we vet things appropriately, rigorously, so that it doesn't come before the public and the readership without having that rigor for evidence.
What kind of role, I see articles, and Mike Glick used to do a lot of these, where he would talk about the process of conducting why randomized controlled trials are on a hierarchy of evidence base and this kind of thing. And it sort of seemed like that there seemed to be a role of the journal to educate the membership on sort of the hierarchy of evidence base. Is that, do you see that as a role to kind of educate on this process of obtaining evidence?
That absolutely is a role. At the time, the evidence-based ADA component did a lot of those kind of articles about this as a systematic review. They had courses to teach people,
right?
And we do that through the academy as well. So the journal does definitely play a role into what the process is, the rigor, and how we get that information to be evidence-based and the highest quality we possibly can. Getting good randomized controlled trials is a challenge. They're costly. They're not easy to run. So it would be nice if we had a whole lot more. And there's ethical issues around some of them. You can't even do them because it wouldn't be ethical to do it.
Right, exactly.
So there's a lot of challenges with that. But fortunately, there are people around the world that are certainly doing randomized controld trials of issues related to pediatric dentistry and oral health care in general. So,
yeah. Well, you talked before about the microbiome, and you and I were discussing the science trends, the oral science trends that you want to be publishing in the journal to educate everybody about what's going on. So tell us a little bit about microbiome again, and then maybe what other oral science trends are there that you see in the form of publications and future issues of JADA?
Well, one was related to the issue of the hierarchy of evidence. So we have an oral science trends manuscript that's in preparation, was invited. Those are invited manuscripts that's on the development of guidelines, how you get to that point, what kind of information, because we have information now that's also not just all randomized controlled trials. I mean, you may have qualitative research. You have other aspects that could be informative in a guideline that should come into play. So we have a manuscript on that, which is not I guess it's science in that it's what's driving the science and the level of evidence. So that'll be a fun one to come out. That one's hopefully getting near completion. We've got related to the oral biome, which I just think is absolutely fascinating. So at the AADR research meeting, I went and heard talks that were just absolutely fascinating, not only what the microbes are, but the interaction and the complex ecology. So there's an invited manuscript on that. And then some are translating science. The ADA's got a lot of interesting with their science research network, some really interesting translational studies going on. So there's one of those has been invited. So there's a whole series of those manuscripts that are getting ready to, hopefully, that are getting in the pipeline. And one of my tasks have been to build that pipeline to get those kind of interesting. So anybody who's listening, if you've got ideas about something, I'm always open ears for that.
That's what I heard from you when we first talked, which is really exciting that you want members to tell you about what do you want the journal to talk about. You know, there are scientists out there somewhere doing it, and let's talk about it. So when you and I were chatting in our last moments here, I want to mention something that you told me. I think we were talking about the microbiome and the science related to that, and you came up with this sort of catchphrase that's going to talk about this. So I don't know if this is a form of an editorial from you or scientific papers, but the words were, "What's in a kiss?" So tell me about what's in a kiss.
I'd be happy to. So it is an editorial, and I don't remember. I think it's coming out in June. And the genesis of that was a paper in Science that I read that just sort of brought home this whole what's in a kiss and saliva and the issues that we play around saliva. And it was a paper that was showing that we learn as humans, and other species do as well, about our interaction, our connectedness with our tribe and with our brethren. And swapping saliva through kisses, food sharing, and others are critical to that process. And so that was part of it. And then the second part was the whole microbiome and the transmission of the biome, and how for years we were recommending as pediatric dentists that it would be forbidden to kiss a kid on the mouth or taste their food and then give them the bugs because you're going to give them strep mutans and that's going to cause caries. And we now know with our science that that's not how this works. The biome that you're going to get, you get some of that through saliva, you get some of it from skin off the mother, and cesarean birth is different than a vaginal birth and how that happens. And so that's what's in a kiss, and the importance of saliva as a transmission, not only from the biome transmission, which is protective unless you do things to make it dysbiotic and pathogenic, but it's part of our socialization, and it's an important part of how kids relate to their mothers and how kids relate to each other. And I just thought it was fascinating, so I wrote an editorial of what's in a kiss.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it because you described this more about socialization, as you just said, and I think that's really interesting because we pediatric dentists are really good at the behavioral aspects. That's why we choose the specialty. We want to learn more about what is the socialization. We're diverse. We want to know about different cultures. So the socialization crosses all those boundaries, and I think that's fascinating perspective. So, and I love the fact that your editorials are always about, so far I'm seeing that you read a nice article in Nature, and then you write an editorial kind of summarizing your perspective based on what you learn from that. And I think that's a great educational method for us. So we get to live through your readings. So that's a great role, and I appreciate you doing that. So that's fantastic.
Well, thanks. It's fun for me. I mean, I get science. I'm in the AAAS, and it's so diverse, and there's so many. And you just almost every issue there's something related. There was one recently that was about genetics and how we define the ancestry.
Yeah.
And it's been done frequently. It's done geographically, and then they go look at the people in this region and what's their genome. And what we find out is that humans have been tribally moving around and intermingling. Right. I mean, even with Neanderthals and other hominid species. Yeah. So the article was basically saying we really need to rethink how we think about the whole ancestry related to genetics and that. It's much more complex. But anyway, it's fun.
We'll probably learn about, the microbiome that transferred from this part of Africa versus here is less karyogenic. And maybe it's diet, but it's also, where the how the socialization occurred thousands of years ago. I don't know.
I don't know either, but where the science takes us is always fascinating. Yeah. And I love being a part of that.
Well, you bring you bring the science geekiness to a good level that everybody enjoys, because I feel that way too. And it's kind of like, don't just focus on your area, but like, let's appreciate the world that we live in, which is about all kinds of science. And JADA wants to deliver that to our members, so that's great. Well, Tim, thanks for being with us today in Pedo Teeth Talk. I appreciate it.
Been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for being with us today. We will see you here next time.
Do you need additional CE hours but don't have time to travel to courses? Did you attend annual session and want to listen to the audio recordings? Check out AAPD's new Education Passport. The redesigned and improved Education Passport is AAPD's online learning center, where you can earn CE and listen to audio recordings from all of our continuing education courses and more. Visit educationpassport.aapd.org for more information. For 10% off any product, use discount code TEETHTALK in the Education Passport store. Pedo Teeth Talk is the show that delivers cutting-edge ideas for the professionals specializing in pediatric dentistry. Be sure to check out previous episodes of Pedo Teeth Talk, as well as our other podcast platform, Newly Erupted. All previous episodes are available on our website. We welcome your ideas for future shows and guests. For more information on the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, visit aapd.org.